Woo! So what a week, everybody. Everything from WWDC being announced, to iOS 19 leaking, to iOS 18.4 RC edition being released. There's a lot that happened this week, and that's not even talking about all the ChatGPT stuff that happened alongside of it. So without further ado, let's talk about everything that happened this week in the world of Apple. Let's get into it. So before we get into the juicy details of iOS 19 and all the things that come with that, let's talk about WWDC briefly, which is when iOS 19 should be announced. So Apple did mention that WWDC will be between June 9th and June 13th of this year, with June 9th being the main day where that keynote happens, where Apple announces all things iOS, iPadOS, macOS, tvOS, and everything else that they make from a software perspective. And for those of you that do want to attend in person, there is a way to apply for it, but you need to be in one of the following criteria. You need to either be an Apple Developer Program registered member, you need to be an Apple Developer Enterprise Program registered member, or a Swift Student Challenge winner from the year 2023 to 2025. That way you can apply and then eventually get picked and selected to be invited to the in-person event. I've applied like 6 years in a row or 5 years in a row and I have not been selected, and this year I did not personally apply because you need to be part of the paid Apple Developer Program. There's two different ones, one being the free one, which is the one that allows you to play with the beta program, both the public beta as well as the developer beta, but then there's also a paid version that gives you a bunch of other options for actual developers that want to get stuff done, and that is the one that you need to be in order to apply to the event to maybe get the chance to go. So if you do want to apply for it, that is how you actually do it for WWDC, but regardless, we'll be covering everything from June 9th to June 13th, everything in between from hardware, software, so I'm excited to see what Apple brings us with iOS 19. And now before we continue with that perfect segue of iOS 19, definitely consider subscribing to the channel because it helps motivate us to make videos like this one, and I love making these Friday 5 videos to keep everybody up to date and with all things Apple. But with iOS 19, you might have seen in the news that John Prosser from FPT did leak a lot of what iOS 19 is going to look like, with a big inspiration coming from VisionOS, the Vision Pro system, and everything that comes with the UI perspective on that front on the iPhone. So again, this is going to be a big visual overhaul, and it's going to be the first big visual overhaul we've had for about 12 years, back when iOS 6 went to iOS 7, and we went from that skeuomorphism to that more flat level design. This is going to be, again, kind of in the middle between those two, because the idea here is to make things pop, make things feel and look kind of 3D, very similar to how VisionOS looks. So if you haven't played with the Vision Pro, I do highly recommend, if you have access to an Apple store within your range, to go book a demo with the Vision Pro to see what that looks like, because that is kind of what we're going to be dealing with when it comes to iOS, but instead of the 3D pane, of course, it's going to be on a 2D plane. Now functionally, iOS 19, we don't really know what's going to be different, but we did see a lot of visual changes, from the camera UI being totally different, the keyboard looking a little bit different, and just all the different UI elements having this kind of transparent, glass-like, translucent design that allows you to see layers deep into the entire operating system, all the way down to the bottom layer, which allows things to pop a little bit more easily, making it easier and more simple to actually dictate what you want from an app developer perspective and what you want the user to do at the end of the day. So I think it's going to be a welcome change overall. I'm all for the circle icons, I'm all for this translucent design, but again, this is going to be a visual overhaul, and it remains yet to be seen what this is going to do functionally. And if you're holding your breath for iOS 19 to be the saving grace for Apple Intelligence, again, I don't really know if that's going to happen, and there's still a big section of Apple Intelligence missing, which is going to be that Siri context awareness, on-screen awareness, and those cross-app actions. So being able to tell Apple Intelligence to go from one application to another, to then do something for you, that is when Apple Intelligence, for me, is going to be the real deal, because until then, right now, to me, it's just kind of like a little bit of a gimmick in my opinion. And I know I'm not alone with that sentiment, because even Apple has taken down some advertising because they are being sued for false advertising of what Siri can do, because they marketed the iPhone 16 as the Apple Intelligence phone, and it still cannot do what they promised back at 2024 at their own WWDC. But, let's see exactly what Apple does with iOS 19 and WWDC this year. And now for things that are actually working, iOS 18.4 and iPadOS 18.4 RC edition did release to the public beta and developer beta, and RC just stands for release candidate, meaning this is going to be the final form of iOS and iPadOS 18.4. So I do recommend downloading it if you want to give it a try a week early, but do expect this to come out probably Monday or Tuesday of next week. You'll be getting things like the recipe catalog in the food section of the News Plus app, you'll get prioritized notifications, you'll be able to get the new 7 emojis, which are kind of nice to have, you'll have the new ambient music in the control center, which is a nice little foreshadow into maybe some sort of HomePod situation. But overall, I do think it's a welcome upgrade, nothing kind of substantial, but a lot of quality of life updates overall. And one bit of kind of meh news, which is going to be something that we did expect, but Apple in the Apple Card Savings Program, or the High Yield Savings Account, is now down to 3.7%, coming down from 3.8%. Now, this is going to be happening down the line. All different banks and credit unions that offer these high-yield savings account have been decreasing the rates over time, little by little, which is allowed to happen because it is a variable interest rate overall. So now we're down to 3.7. It does compete fairly well with some of those other banks like the SoFis and the Allies of the world, albeit it's still kind of on the lesser end, but it's still much higher than what traditional banks like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and those will give you. So 3.7% is not something to scoff at still. But it is crazy to think that we were at 4.5% when this high yield savings account first opened up, and now we're down to 3.7%. And now I did want to bring up to light this new leak that came from Majin Buu, which kind of illustrates how thin this new iPhone 17 Air is really supposed to be. The leaks have said that it's going to be about 5.5 millimeters in thickness, which does make it still a little bit thicker than the thinnest point of the new M4 iPad Pro, the 13-inch variant, but still 5.5 inches in thickness in such a small form factor is something that I think is going to be very welcome overall for people that want to have the thinnest and lightest phone. And in this image, you can see it being compared to what the iPhone 17 Pro thickness is going to be like, and you can see that it's almost half as thin as the actual iPhone 17 Pro. The iPhone 17 Pro is like 8.75 millimeters versus the 5.5 millimeters, so it's not quite half as thin, but just from the look of it, it does look very thin, and you can see in the image, if you zoom into that USB-C port, it's almost as thin as the actual USB-C port, which is very cool to see. So I'm all for bringing the thinness form factor. I remember back in the day when thinness was the king in terms of form factor, and what Apple was trying to do from a thinness perspective, they were just trying to make things as thin as possible. If you guys remember the iPhone 6 and 6S series, that's what kind of brought over Bendgate, but I'm sure Apple's not going to relive Bendgate all over again with things being a lot more structurally sound when it comes to building these thinner iPhones. And then last but not least, I did want to quickly bring up the new ChatGPT integrations that were happening, or the new updated ChatGPT. If you guys have been on social media, you see all these different kind of animations happening from real world images to then using different animation styles, and that's because ChatGPT can now use images, kind of convert them to whatever you want, change the style of them, combine images, and it's really turned into kind of a free-for-all in ChatGPT, and I mean that in the best way possible. People can get as creative as they want by adding, removing, and using ChatGPT 4o as a tool. Now again, this is part of the paid version of ChatGPT. I believe it's $20 a month. And if you're a creative, I think this is a no-brainer expense in my opinion, and it's going to be something that people are going to be using moving forward, and I think people are going to be adopting this very, very quickly. So if you guys haven't played with it, it's definitely a lot of fun, and something that I've just been using and spending hours on, kind of recreating images of myself in kind of a Dragon Ball Z animation, or some sort of other anime. I even did one the other day of me being a Sesame Street character, and it looked pretty good. But those are all the things that are happening in tech and Apple this week. There's a lot of good things happening. I am very excited for iOS 19 just from a visual look because it's going to make your phone feel a little bit different and actually feel like a new phone, but I'm curious to see what Apple does and how they kind of sell us Apple Intelligence moving forward, because honestly, it was a big miss for an entire year overall in my opinion. But leave a comment down below what you think about Apple Intelligence and everything that happened this week. But that'll do it, everybody. If you made it to the end, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so I know you made it to the end. And if you want to watch more videos like this one, definitely check out one of these videos right here. And until next time, I'm Fernando. Peace, everybody. iOS 19 is going to be killer.